Rain had fallen steadily for days, soft at first, then cruel, the kind of cold that knew how to get inside the skin, slipping in through damp boot leather and shirt collars. It had bleached the woods pale and filled the lowlands with stagnant pools, turning roads to rivers and rivers to black veins threading through fields no longer claimed by anything but hunger. Caleb stopped where the gravel path gave way to mud, his boots squelching deep enough to steal his breath. The air was thick with fog, a choking, silent vapor that did not rise, but crept. The woods had gone mute. Even the crows, bold creatures that nested in the ash trees near the crossing, had abandoned their cries. He stood with the ledger wrapped in oilcloth beneath one arm, a lantern dangling from his gloved hand. Its light weak and unwilling to travel. Every footstep behind him had stopped miles ago, but he could still feel the presence of someone who should not have followed. The map had brought him here, hand-drawn and faded, edges singed, the parchment lined with notes in a spidery script that resembled his father's, though Caleb's father had died long before he was born. He did not remember how he had come by it, only that it had been folded into the back of a library book he could not recall checking out. There, on the wrinkled paper, was the name again, Meyer House. Not a place on any modern chart, no postal record, no census, but there it was, inscribed with the certainty of something that had once been known deeply and then forgotten deliberately. The lantern sputtered. Fog pressed against it like flesh, and then a shape emerged ahead, a silhouette, low and angular, half drowned in shadow. Stone and timber, long abandoned to ivy and moss. Shutters missing, door cracked, roof sagging like the spine of a kneeling beast. Meyer House. It did not look abandoned. It looked patient. Caleb stepped forward. The closer he came, the more the house changed. Not in shape, but in memory. His memory. He remembered this porch, this banister, notched with symbols he used to trace with his finger when his father wasn't watching. This iron door pull, rusted red, bent at the base where it had once broken during a storm when he paused. No, he had never been here before. Had he? His hand touched the door. Wood, slick with cold. Something moved beneath the grain. A pulse, a rhythm, faint but steady. He opened it. The interior yawned in quiet. No groan of old hinges. No creak of warped floorboards. Just a sigh of breath drawn too deeply. Inside, dust hung, unmoving in columns of lantern light. The floor was patterned tile, covered in small tracks. Not vermin, but bare feet. Some long, some short, some clawed. On the wall to his left, an object waited. He turned the lantern. It was a mirror, tall, stained, but not reflecting. Instead, behind the glass, ink had bloomed like wrought into an image, faintly shimmering in the fog light. A ledger, bound in blue, sitting on a table he did not yet see, and below it his name, his full name, etched not in ink, but bone. The door shut behind him without sound. No draft, no breeze, no shifting weight. Just a silence folding like damp wool, thick and too close, tugging at his breath. Caleb turned slowly, lifting the lantern to scan the room again. Its light found no dust in the air now, no motion, no decay. The bare footprints that had crisscrossed the floor had vanished. He stepped forward. Each footfall landed clean and echoless, muffled not by carpet or cloth, but by something less material, a pressure, like walking beneath a great weight, deep underwater where sound ceased to move. To his right, a corridor stretched into darkness, its walls lined with empty frames. To his left, a staircase, spiral, narrow, wrapped in shadow that seemed alive. But ahead, through a low archway, he saw it, the table, and upon it, the ledger. It was just as a mirror had shown, blue leather, wore at the edges, the corners darker with oil from hands long dead. Beside it sat a silver bell, small and unpolished, tethered to nothing, resting on lace that had yellowed with age and absorbed the smell of rotting paper and smoke. Caleb approached. Each step forward felt more familiar than the last. This room, too, he remembered, or thought he did. The water-stained wallpaper, the crooked ceiling beam, the window, yes, the window, though it now looked out only into the colorless fog. He touched the chair, and it creaked in recognition. He sat. The ledger pulsed beneath his hand. Not literally, not visibly, but he felt it, like warmth from coals not yet ash. The pages curled ever so slightly, eager, as if sensing the nearness of their reader. He opened it. The first page was blank. So was the second. The third bore only 2 words, scrawled in thin brown ink. You began. And then a date, his date of birth. He flipped forward. A new entry. You forgot. There was no year. He turned more pages, each trembling slightly beneath his touch. Names appeared, some familiar, vaguely, like echoes in someone else's dream. Others felt impossible, too old, too strange to belong to this world. But one page stopped him cold. His name again, and beneath it a list. First tooth, grandmother's mirror, house key, the letters in the attic, the meadow behind the church. Lila, each item triggered something. An ache in the ribs, a flicker behind the eye. The scent, wet soil, cinnamon, old stone. Memories, or things like them. Things buried. And the last one, Lila. He whispered the name before he could stop himself. And the room answered, not with voice or creak, but with a subtle shift in the air. The door to his right, the one in the corner he hadn't noticed before, clicked once, twice, and slowly swung open. Inside was not another room, but a staircase, downward. Damp air rolled up from below, and in it, faint but clear, laughter. Childish, giddy, but wrong, as though something had learned to imitate joy without ever having known it. Caleb stood, heart hammering. The lantern flickered. The ledger snapped shut on its own, and the name Lila glowed briefly on the cover, then disappeared. The staircase was made of stone, not old as Caleb expected, but slick, heavy slabs that looked chiseled rather than built. They descended in a tight spiral, the walls pressing inward, each step slightly narrower than the last. He hesitated at the top, lantern trembling in his grip. From below, that laughter continued, intermittent, echoing. Wrong. He took the first step, then the second. Soon the light from above was swallowed in the fog, always too close, thickened behind him like a curtain falling shut. There was no going back. Each footstep was absorbed into silence. The only sound was the whispering of the flame inside the lantern, though sometimes, just barely. He thought he heard something scraping along the wall, just outside the light's edge. The descent felt eternal. He passed what looked like openings in the wall, arched entryways sealed by wooden doors with small slits in them. Some were chained shut. Others bore sigils drawn in chalk and red string. He tried not to look too closely. At the base of the stairs, the corridor leveled, and the laughter stopped. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was not empty. It was listening. Caleb held the lantern high. He found himself standing in a long underground hall, stone-floored and ceiling in a low arch of brick slicked with condensation. Doors lined the sides, thick ironwood, some with windows, some solid. There were no signs, no numbers, except one. Near the end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar, and on it, scrawled in chalk the color of bone, Lila. He approached slowly. The air here was different, warm, sweet, like the scent of syrup left to spoil or overripe fruit. Beneath it, rot. The door creaked open when he touched it, though he hadn't pushed. The lantern illuminated the room inside. It was small, no larger than a child's bedroom. A wooden bed sat against one wall, perfectly made, with a quilt patterned in pale blues and yellows. A toy chest at its foot, closed. Shelves lined with old books, some bound in leather, others in what looked like tan skin, the lettering shifting when he tried to read it. And on the far wall, a mirror, not like the one upstairs. This one was full-length, elegant, oval, rimmed in brass. Its surface shimmered like water. As he stepped inside, it did not reflect the room. It reflected another, one Caleb could not see behind him. This room and the mirror looked the same, except the bed was unmade, the shelves broken, the chest overturned. And there, in the reflection, stood a little girl, hair white as milk, eyes black as coal. She wore a dress the color of drowned lilacs. She did not move. Caleb turned slowly to look behind him. The room was empty. He looked back at the mirror. Now the girl was closer, just behind him. She raised one hand and placed it against the glass. Her fingers were too long, too thin. The nails cracked and yellow. When she smiled, her teeth were not human. Caleb backed away. The mirror rippled, and the laughter returned, not behind the mirror, but inside the room now, crawling through the air like an infestation. The door slammed shut. The lantern sputtered. And then, just before the light blinked out, he saw the name scratched into the inside of the door, dozens of times, over and over. Caleb, Caleb, Caleb. And below it, one final line. You left me here. He did not remember falling asleep or waking up. He simply found himself standing again, the lantern cold in his hand. The mirror cracked from end to end, the room empty save for the echo of something recently absent. The scent of rot remained, sweeter now, almost cloying, as though trying to disguise itself. The door behind him stood open. The hall beyond was still and dim, the air heavier, the ceiling seemingly lower, as though the building itself were slowly closing in on him. He walked back toward the spiral staircase, though it took more effort than before, like wading through honey. At the stairs, he paused. A sound trickled down from above, a faint ringing. It wasn't sharp like a traditional bell. No chime, no clarity, just a vibration, a tremble in the air, like hearing metal resonate from far underwater. He climbed, and with each step, the sound grew softer, until it wasn't sound at all, but a feeling in his teeth, a pressure behind the eyes, a sense of something trying to remember him. When he reached the main floor, the parlor was dark, the window now bricked over, the table gone. The ledger remained, resting on the floor where the table had been, its cover slightly ajar, inviting. He didn't touch it. Instead, he turned his attention to the sound, or lack of it. The bell. It drew him now, not with urgency, but with intimacy, as though it knew his name better than he did, as though it had whispered it countless times across countless thresholds. And though it made no true sound, it filled the house like a scent, impossible to locate, impossible to ignore. It pulled him left, into a corridor he hadn't seen before. The walls here were papered in vertical stripes of cream and brown, now peeling, revealing a layer of symbols beneath. Sigils etched in soot and what looked like dried blood. The scent intensified. Iron, mildew, burnt oil. He reached the door, unmarked, handle missing, but something inside was breathing. He could feel it, a gentle exhale, steady and low, vibrating the floorboards beneath his boots. Caleb pressed his ear to the door, not out of courage, but compulsion. And then he heard it. Not breath, not wind, not a bell, but voice, quiet and feminine, as though spoken into a tin-can string from another world. It said, "Do not wake her." He staggered back. The door remained shut, but the wood was warm now, pulsing gently like flesh. From behind it, something shifted. Wait, mass. And then, scratching, long, slow, deliberate, as if made by bone. He turned and fled. The corridor stretched longer now. The lantern flickered with every step. The bell sound chased him, low, soft, like an inhale about to become a scream. When he reached the parlor again, the ledger was open and glowing faintly with a dim, colorless light. One word pulsed on the page. You knocked. Below it, a name, Isadora, and a new page turned by itself, as though guided by wind from nowhere. There, written in that same ink, old and dry and brown, was a sketch of the room he had just fled, and beneath it, the words, "This is where she sleeps. Do not return without the key." Caleb stepped back, and behind him, the bell gave a final tremor, soundless, scentless, pure pressure, and then stopped. The house exhaled again, and something above stirred. The stairwell to the upper floors had not been visible when Caleb first entered the house, but now, with the bell silenced and the parlor thick with the dust of motionless time, it revealed itself beside the hearth, slender, crooked, ascending into a shadow deeper than any lantern could pierce. He stared upward. There was a pull, like gravity reversed. The sense that something above remembered him, or was waiting to. He climbed. The steps groaned beneath his weight, though none gave way. They were narrow, uneven, worn by more feet than seemed possible. As he ascended, he noticed each wall bore framed photographs, sepia toned and blurred by dust, the faces scratched out or painted over with thick, black slashes. Some had symbols carved into glass. Others were upside down. He reached the landing. The second floor was a narrow hallway, just 5 doors, all shut, all unmarked, except one. The door at the end of the hall had no frame. It was embedded directly into the wall like an incision. Its surface was covered in old childlike drawings, stick figures in red and black crayon, some headless, others surrounded by spirals and inverted stars. Above the door, a single phrase etched deep into plaster. She hears through wood. The handle was cold. His hand shook as he turned it. The attic stairs were steep, nearly a ladder. The lantern flickered, as if struggling to follow. Each rung whispered beneath his feet. At the top, a trapdoor waited, slightly ajar, releasing a smell like wet cloth and dried lilies. He pushed it open. The attic was vast, bigger than the house should have allowed. The ceiling vanished into black. Rafters arched like ribs. The floor was uneven, covered in pale, wilting petals. Old furniture stood like gravestones, wardrobe chairs, a dollhouse taller than a man. Toys hung from the rafters on strings, turning slowly in the still air. Wind-up birds, marionettes, a music box without a lid spinning silently, and at the far end, an old crib. It rocked gently, though no breeze stirred. He stepped closer. Inside was not a child. It was a bundle of cloth, old and rotted, wrapped tightly in twine, soaked dark at one end. A single, white-gloved hand protruded from the bundle. Small and limp, fingers curled. The air grew colder. Behind him, something creaked. He turned. The attic door had vanished. No trapdoor, no stairs. Just smooth, endless wall behind him now. The toys stopped turning. The shadows deepened. And then from the crib, the bundle twitched. Not the wind. A pulse. It twitched again more violently, and the hand flexed once before going limp. The twine began to unwind itself, one thread at a time, slowly pulling away into the floorboards, disappearing like veins retracting into the earth. Something wet breathed beneath the cloth. Caleb stepped back, but the floor gave way slightly beneath him. It was soft in places. Breathing, a low hum began to rise, not a song, but a tone, barely perceptible, felt more than heard. And then a voice, not from the crib, but from above, from the rafters. It whispered, "Why did you come back?" Caleb looked up. A face stared down, eyes white, lips sewn shut, its head turned with the sound of cracking twigs. And from the walls, the child's drawings began to shimmer. They moved, danced, and laughed. He turned back to the crib, but it was empty now. The bundle gone. In its place, a single key, black, twisted, cold as iron, wrapped around it, a note tied in twine. It read, "Return below. She's waking, and she's not alone." The attic released him without argument. One blink and the trapdoor was open again, the stairs below waiting, the lantern slightly dimmer, the house groaning as though having held its breath far too long. Caleb didn't remember descending. He didn't remember stepping back into the hall, or reaching the main floor again. The house shifted as he moved, like it had grown, or reconfigured itself. Fewer windows now, more doors. The parlor stretched farther than it had before, with the fireplace now blackened with soot as if something had recently burned for hours. And the ledger, always a ledger, rested now on a small table in the center of the room, its pages fluttering without wind. The key in his hand pulsed. He knew where it belonged. The cellar door, previously locked and half hidden behind old curtains, now stood slightly open, the darkness beneath it heavy and wet. A thin film of moisture covered the first step, and the air that issued from below smelled not like earth or stone, but molded leather and iron. He descended. Each step gave off a hollow sound, as though below was not earth but cavern. The stairwell spiraled, though the space should not have allowed it. He followed the curve downward, deeper than the foundation of any house should reach. The lantern hissed with effort, then the stairs ended, and he stood in a room with no ceiling, only roots and dripping soil far above, as though the house had simply suspended him in the belly of the world. The walls were stone, but the mortar between them writhed with veins, living, pulsing with dim light. The room had no corners, just a round shape like a drain cistern, and at its center an altar built from bones. Tiny ones, birds, rabbits, a cat's jaw still stained with fur, and larger ones, too, vertebrae, femurs, ribs, all fused together, shaped into a crude, triangular slab. Upon it, a book, older than any Caleb had ever seen, bound in leather blackened with age, the pages thick and brittle. Beside the book, a bell, small, tarnished, silent. He approached, the key heavy in his hand. The book opened itself as he neared. No gust, no fanfare, just pages turning of their own accord until it rested upon one filled with a single sentence. Ring once to descend, twice to awaken, thrice to invite. He looked to the bell. It was cracked, and yet it seemed whole. He reached for it, but the key in his other hand pulsed hard, almost scalding. He looked down. The black metal had begun to flake, like burnt paper. He placed it on the altar, and it instantly melted into the stone, vanishing between the bones. The bell rang. No hand touched it. A soundless strike, but every bone in his body felt it. A pressure behind the eyes. A cold drip on the back of the neck. The altar sank, slowly, spiraling down into the floor, and in its place, a stair, descending, alive with veins and flickering light, like the inside of something that shouldn't have been opened. From below came a scent not of decay, but of forgottenness, something abandoned by memory, something too ancient for rot, older than dust, older than grief. The lantern flickered violently, but Caleb stepped forward, because above, something had begun moving again, heavy, slow, waking. The stairs spiraled downward into a corridor of unshaped stone, glistening, breathing, soaked in a quiet that pressed against Caleb's ears like cotton. The walls were rounded, glistening faintly, veined in colors too deep to name. Not red, not purple, something older, something that had never seen the light of day. As he moved, the space did not widen. It narrowed. The deeper he went, the more the walls curved in, until he could barely walk upright. His lantern dimmed again, not from lack of oil, but from sheer resistance, as though the dark here preferred itself undisturbed. Ahead, the sound began. At first, just a soft tapping, then a distant dragging, a rhythmic pull, pause, pull, like fabric being drawn across wet stone. Caleb paused. So did the sound. He stepped again. Pull, pause, pull. It followed. The tunnel opened into a chamber carved with infinite patience. The walls here bore reliefs. Scratched into the stone was something sharp but unskilled. They showed figures with no faces, towering over a town with no doors. Children with limbs bent the wrong way, walking into the mouths of trees. Shapes hunched and ringed by eyes, kneeling before a cracked bell. In the center of the room, a doorway. No door, just an arch. Within it, total darkness. It did not reflect the lantern's glow. It consumed it. Above the arch, carved in stone, the words, "If she remembers you, she will not permit return." Caleb stepped forward, breath shallow. The dragging behind him ceased, but something else began. A whisper, not in language, but in rhythm, like breath caught in a throat, like lungs forgotten how to exhale. He passed through the arch, and the warmth in his skin recoiled. The inside of the tunnel beyond the arch was colder than any wind he'd known. Not dead cold, hungry cold. It wounded in ways that didn't obey gravity. He walked up, but moved down. He turned right, and came back to where he started. At one point, the floor was a ceiling. At another, he felt the tunnel breathe. Then it opened, not into a room, but into a memory. He recognized it. A hallway. His hallway. From childhood. The one outside his room. back in the house where he'd grown up. Faded wallpaper, a single crack frame, the light above always flickering even when changed. Impossible, but real. He stepped forward. His foot creaked on the same board it always had, the one that gave him away when sneaking to the kitchen past bedtime. He reached for the door to his childhood bedroom. It opened on its own. Inside, not his room. A field, lit by twilight, tall dry grass, and at the center, a figure, not facing him, kneeling, a girl. She wore the same white gloves as the hand from the crib, and as Caleb stepped through, he realized something with a clarity that stopped his breath. This wasn't a memory. It was a burial, a place memory had tried to forget. The girl stood, turned. Her face wasn't a face, just a smooth sheet of porcelain with a mouth painted on in red. She raised a hand. From behind her, bells began to chime, all at once. Too many, hundreds, thousands, ringing from beneath the field, as if the earth itself had swallowed 1,000 towers. And with each chime, the world around him flickered. The tunnel, the field, the hallway, the house, all gone, all one. He tried to look away, but his body would not move. He tried to speak, but his tongue was stone. The figure stepped forward, and the bells rang faster, and faster, and faster, until sound collapsed into silence, and the porcelain mask opened its mouth, wide, wider, too wide, and whispered his name. The porcelain face did not move, not in any human sense, but Caleb felt the shape of the whisper coil through his body, like a fevered dream that wouldn't break. Caleb, not spoken, not breathed, remembered. His knees buckled, not from fear but from pressure, like standing too close to something vast and tidal. His vision shuddered, as though the world itself had blinked and refused to reopen. The field, the sky, the girl, everything pulsed with an invisible heartbeat, like the rhythm of some unseen wound. He tried to crawl backward. The ground resisted him. Each inch of movement like dragging himself through molasses laced with static. The figure began to move again. No steps, no gait, just a shift, like a film-spliced misaligned. A jump forward that brought her inches from him in an instant. Up close, the porcelain revealed cracks. Hairline fissures, spiderweb from the corners of the painted mouth. A chunk at the jaw had broken off completely, revealing not flesh, not bone, but a darkness that shimmered like oil in moonlight. She raised a hand again. This time, Caleb's body answered, not of his own will. His hand moved his chest, and with excruciating slowness, began to press inward, not clawing, not striking, just pressing, like he was searching for a door inside his own ribs. And something within him shifted in reply. Not pain, not quite, more like the ache of an old injury being remembered by the body before the mind. The field around them withered. The sky above bent inward. And suddenly Caleb was not in the field at all, but in the ledger. He was inside it. The sky was paper. The ground was ink. The trees were made of runes, and the wind whispered in languages never spoken aloud. The girl stood before him still, but now she had his face. Not porcelain, not cracked, his actual face. Eyes dull, lips moving soundlessly. She raised the ledger in both hands and opened it. The pages turned of their own accord. Faster, faster, until it stopped on a page written in his handwriting. Words he had never penned but had always known. There are places the body may not follow, but the name always does. Caleb tried to scream. His mouth would not open. Instead, the girl, his mirror, leaned forward and whispered again, "You are not the first." The ledger vanished. The world turned white, and suddenly, a stairwell, dimly lit, with damp and splintered. The house again, somewhere deeper now, as if the structure had peeled away the layers of itself to reveal something older, something truer. At the bottom of the stairs was a room of clocks, hundreds of them, none ticking, all frozen, except one, a small one, pocket-sized, with a spiderweb crack through the glass. It ticked in a rhythm that didn't match any time Caleb knew. He reached out and took it. The ticking stopped. Then every other clock began, all at once, thousands of different times clanging and spinning, hands jerking forward, backward, faster, faster, then silence. All the clocks pointed at the same time. 3:17. The lights flickered. The door behind him vanished. And the mirror girl stood across the room, not moving, not blinking, holding something, his childhood bedroom door. She turned and walked into the wall. The wall split to accept her, then closed. Caleb stood alone in the room of clocks. And behind one of them, faint but rising, a sound. The bell, once, twice, a third time, then scratching, from inside the walls, from inside the clocks, from inside him. The ticking died again, not faded, died, like a heart stilled, like breath withheld too long. One moment, the room of clocks roared a mechanical dissonance. The next, it was a tomb of still hands and glass faces watching him with the dead neutrality of monuments. Something had shifted. Caleb knew this pattern now. The way the house changed when it wanted something. It never creaked randomly. It never echoed by accident. Every groan of timber was a word. Every bend in the hallway. Every door that appeared or vanished. It all spoke a language deeper than speech, older than architecture. He turned in place. The clocks no longer had backs. Their faces were fixed directly to the stone itself, embedded like fossils. Their brass edges fused with the masonry. The room had closed. The mirror girl had taken the only door with her, his door, and vanished into a wall that no longer existed. But beneath one of the larger grandfather clocks, the stone breathed, not metaphorically. The rock rose and fell with the rhythm of something slumbering behind it. Moisture wept from the seams. The brass pendulum of the largest clock twitched, like a muscle resisting rigor mortis. Caleb stepped toward it. His fingers brushed the clock's wooden edge, and the face shattered inward, revealing a hollow tunnel just large enough to crawl through. Beyond it, a faint glow, the warmth of firelight and the familiar scent of soot-dampened brick. The hearth, but not the one from the parlor, not the small fireplace he'd glimpsed days ago in waking memory. This was older, hung with chains, iron-bound, built directly into stone older than the rest of the house. He climbed through. The tunnel scratched him, tore at his sleeves, pulled hair from his arms like greedy fingers. But he forced himself through and emerged into a circular chamber, the hearth at its center. Flames danced without wood. Smoke curled up but vanished before reaching any chimney. Above the fire hung a pot, a massive one, blackened with time. Steam whispered from its lip. He could not see what boiled within it, but something moved in the broth. Not meat, not vegetables. Shapes, letters, at first illegible, then clear. C-A-L-E-B. The broth rearranged itself. B-E-L-O-W. He stepped back, and the hearth roared. A wind burst from it. Not heat, not air, but memory. The scent of chalk and pencils. His old fifth-grade classroom. The feel of corduroy against skin. His father's coat, scratchy and warm. Then darker things. The suffocating cold of a childhood closet. The shape of something that whispered his name from the vent. The room filled with shadows. Each one shaped like someone he'd once forgotten. Not ghosts. Not quite. Just the hollowed-out shells of old recollections. Standing silently. Ringed around the hearth like mourners at a wake. Then a voice, his voice from the flames. I left myself down here. The broth stilled. The fire died. The pot cracked. The room chilled instantly. Frost spread from the stone, crawling over the walls, reaching for his boots. Behind him, the tunnel had sealed shut. No way back. The wall across the hearth flickered, then split, revealing a long, narrow hallway lined with portraits, all of them blank, until he walked, with each step one frame filled. A face, another, his, again, and again, and again, but aged, each one slightly different. Gray hair, wrinkles, scars, a glass eye, a missing jaw, variations of himself that had grown in other directions. One portrait stopped him. It was painted in oils, richly detailed. His face, but twisted with grief, eyes sunken, mouth open in a scream too wide for any human throat. At the bottom, the brass plate read, Caleb V. returned. He reached out to touch the canvas, and the hallway fell away. Not collapsed, simply vanished, and he plummeted into blackness. No wind, no end, only the ledger, open, falling with him. Pages flipping upward as he descended, as though he were falling through it. And far below, a floor, black, polished, reflective. He did not hit it. He simply was there, standing and staring at a door, his bedroom door. Old wood, stickers from his childhood still half scraped away, and behind it, breathing. Caleb didn't remember reaching for the doorknob. He only remembered the coldness of it, the way it bit into his palm like frost-covered iron, and the soft, high-pitched click of the latch giving way, like a throat clearing in the distance. The door opened with no resistance, and the room beyond was wrong. Not merely unfamiliar, not misshapen or decayed, just impossible. There were no corners, none. Every surface curved. The ceiling domed, the walls bowed. Even the floor had the subtle upward tilt of a dish. It was like stepping into the hollow of an enormous egg. There were no visible seams, no lines, no molding, no separation between floor, wall, and ceiling, just an unbroken skin of matte gray, as if the room had been sculpted, not built. But what made his stomach churn was how quiet it was. Sound didn't carry here. His breath felt distant. His heartbeat sounded like it belonged to someone else. He stepped inside. The door behind him vanished. Not closed, vanished. There was no light source, yet the room was lit dimly as if from within the walls themselves. At the center stood a single object, a wooden chair, or at least something pretending to be wood. It had the right texture, the right grain, but the wrong feel. When he brushed it with his fingers, it was too warm, too soft, almost skin-like. On the seat of the chair was a book, not the ledger, not the one that had fallen with him. This book was thicker. The cover was stitched, not bound, threaded with red cord that pulsed faintly, like veins. Caleb stared at it for a long time. He didn't touch it, not yet. Instead, he moved slowly around the room, running one hand along the wall. No texture, no heat. The air was dead. Time didn't pass here. The way of the world had been put on pause. When he finally returned to the book, he saw something written across the stitched cover. This is what you forgot to forget. The second line appeared as he read the first. Do not read unless you wish to stay. The third line came a moment later. To stay is to become. He should have walked away. He didn't. He opened the book. There were no printed pages, just reflections, not of him, of rooms, moments, events, all viewed from strange angles, as if through a doorknob or from beneath a bed. He flipped forward, faster. Each page became more chaotic. Hallways turned inside out. Windows looking into forests that should not exist. Streets buried in fog. Children walking backward on hands bent the wrong way. The book was a journal, but not his. It was written by the house. Each page was something it had seen, and at the center, between two cracked and curling spreads, was a single photograph. A man, wearing Caleb's face, standing in front of the Meyer house, smiling. Behind him, the mirror girl, holding his hand, and behind her, the other Calebs, their faces melting, their eyes gone. He slammed the book shut. The chair groaned beneath it, like a living thing uncomfortable in its posture. A deep, croaking exhale escaped from the upholstery. The red threads across the cover twitched, tugged once as if tightening and then stilled. The walls began to throb, low, rhythmic, like breathing again. Then movement from the far side of the room. A patch of wall peeled back, not like a door, but like skin opening at a scar. Inside, darkness, a narrow staircase, curving downward, lit by nothing but pulses of red light that traveled through veins in the walls like tracking dyes. Caleb stepped forward. Behind him, the book unlatched itself. One of the red threads detached and slithered along the floor, wrapping around his ankle. He shook it loose. It didn't resist, but the chair made a sound. Not a creak, not with shifting. A laugh, low, guttural, amused. He didn't turn back. He walked down the stairs, and with each step, the laughter faded, replaced by whispers. Many voices, all his own. The staircase curved endlessly downward, spiraling like a peeled orange rind. There were no steps, only the sensation of descending, his weight pressing forward, as if the incline itself bent gravity sideways. With each turn, the light deepened, from dim red to black velvet maroon, until he could no longer see his feet, only the slick veins glowing faintly along the walls, like old embers in ash. The whispers multiplied. Sometimes they echoed, other times they came from just over his shoulder. And always they used his voice. He's not coming back. You were supposed to forget. The book is part of you now. You brought her with you. No corners, no corners, no corners. At last, the passage widened into a low gallery of archways. The stone underfoot turned smooth. Wet mold seeped from the joints between each block. The air smelled like old paper drowned in ink. Caleb entered the gallery and stopped. Rows of alcoves lined the walls. In each, a figure stood perfectly still. Their bodies were wrapped in long, dusty cloaks, robes stained with mildew and bound shut with twisted cords that looked like human hair. Their faces were hooded, but the cloth wasn't opaque. It was thin as onion skin, stretched over blank white masks beneath. The masks had no features, just faint outlines, a suggestion of cheekbones, noses flattened as if by pressure, and at the center of each face, a single inked where the third eye might be. As Caleb stepped between the alcoves, the air grew heavy, saturated with memory. Each figure held a ledger, not like the one he'd found upstairs. These were older, bound in bark or leather or things that pulsed faintly beneath their laces. Every so often, a page would turn on its own, though no breeze stirred the room. This is the archive, he thought. He didn't know how he knew, but he did. The archive of the Hollow Ones, keepers of memory not their own, bearers of lives they never lived. Each a vessel emptied out, made to carry stories like parasites carried eggs. He touched one. The robe was moist, sticky with sap or sweat or something deeper. The mask twitched. A crack appeared down its center. Caleb stumbled back, but the figure didn't move. The crack didn't widen. It just smiled. Somehow, without mouth or muscle, the mask conveyed a grin. Cold, inevitable. He turned away, but the alcoves were no longer still. One by one, the figures were shivering. Their shoulders twitched. Their ledgers trembled in their hands. The red thread pulsed along their bindings, synchronizing with some rhythm beneath the earth, like heartbeats syncing to a single drum. Then a voice echoed through the space, not from one figure, but from all of them at once. Do you remember what you were before she found you? Do you remember who you are without her shadow? Caleb shook his head. I don't. She gave you back to the house. Now the house will give you to U.S. And all at once, the ledgers opened. Pages spilled out, not flat, three-dimensional, expanding like pop-up books sculpted from smoke. Entire rooms unfolded in the air, staircases twisted like intestines, children sobbing into walls, a woman locked in a cabinet full of mirrors, scenes from lives never his, but now buried in his chest like shrapnel. And in every image, somewhere hidden behind curtains, beneath beds, inside cabinets, the mirror girl watched, still, waiting. As the visions passed, the Hollow Ones began to move, not toward him. They moved inward, folding into themselves, like puppets collapsing without strings. Each one fell, slow as autumn leaves, until the ledgers were all that remained, stacked in neat, pulsing piles on the stone floor. Behind them, a new archway had opened, a hallway, long, silent, and at the end, a door, heavy, wooden, breathing. The hallway beyond the Hollow Ones was narrower than the rest. It bowed inward slightly, as if the walls were drawing breath themselves, expanding and deflating like a throat trying to speak. Caleb stepped forward, each footfall muffled by a thick carpet of dust, broken only by scattered bones, some rodent-sized, others longer. He no longer heard the whispers, only a low heartbeat, thudding just beneath the stone, the kind that made his teeth feel loose in his jaw. Ahead stood the door. It was not locked, not barred, but it pulsed in a slow rhythm, its wood glistening with a thin sheen of moisture, like sweat clinging to skin after a fever. There was no handle, just a ring of iron embedded in the center, almost ornamental, except it pulsed too, responding to his presence. He reached for it. The door inhaled. It made no sound, but he felt it, a suction of memory, pulling at him to his fingertips. And then he remembered something he had never known before. The room behind this door had been there before the rest of the house, before the town, before people, before names. It had waited under the earth like a seed buried too deep, and now it was flowering. He pulled the ring. The door exhaled and opened. Darkness poured out, not just the absence of light, but the active, wet weight of something watching. A deep, suffocating presence that pressed against the back of his eyes. The chamber was not a room, not really. It was a void, framed by walls that seemed to stretch away forever. But when he walked, the walls moved with him, as if they were painted on the inside of a bowl. At the center stood a pedestal. On it, a mirror, but not the mirror, not the one from the cabinet. This one was round, like the pupil of a colossal eye, rimmed with silver that tarnished before his gaze. Its surface was not reflective. Rather, it shimmered like oil, undulating with too many layers of images trying to break through. He approached it. The heartbeat grew louder. The mirror whispered, not in words, but in moments, quick flashes of sensation. A little boy drowning in a porcelain tub filled with ink. A woman sewn into a bridal dress. Each stitch of memory pulled from her skull. A house that remembered every breath ever taken inside it. A girl with eyes like cracked mirrors, crawling through a narrow space that never ended. Caleb reached out. The surface broke. It didn't ripple. It tore like wet fabric, and something reached out from the other side. A hand, slender, pale, tapered fingers, nails bitten to the quick. The hand touched his chest, right over the spot where the thread from the original ledger had first cut him. He felt again, like the tip of a needle dipping through skin. "You brought her here," said the thing behind the mirror. The voice came from everywhere, and nowhere. You walked the house. You broke the locks. You read the pages. Now you are the ledger. He tried to step back, but his feet were planted. Roots, or something like them, had coiled around his ankles. The floor had grown veins. The room, if it was one, had begun to breathe faster. The hand pushed, and Caleb fell into the mirror. There was no transition, no impact, just a sudden collapse of direction. He landed in a chair, in the cabin, the original cabin, but the fire was out. The walls were wet. The ledger was open, and across from him, sitting where his reflection should be, was the mirror girl. But she was no longer quite a girl. Her face was older. Caleb sat still. The chair beneath him creaked not with age, but with resignation, like it had been waiting for him to fill it again. Across from him, the mirror girl's lips moved without making a sound. She mouthed words from the ledger, but the sounds came from elsewhere, above him, behind the walls, beneath the cabin. The voice spilled like cold syrup down his spine. He tried to rewrite the house. But the house was never a story. The house was a hunger. The ledger in her lap flipped of its own accord. Each page bled ink. The words didn't fade or smear. They bled. Long, curling strokes of text wept from the paper, flowing across the desk and soaking into the floorboards, which sucked it up greedily. Caleb tried to rise. His knees wouldn't obey. The fire pit across the room was cold. Below, orange glow pulsed beneath the blackened logs. Not flame, not coals, just a heartbeat, flickering in rhythm with his own. The mirror girl tilted her head, listening. "You remember too much now," she said. Her voice came from her mouth this time, but it still didn't feel like it belonged to her. It was too big, too layered, as though a choir of forgotten things spoke through her teeth. "You carried all the pieces into the house. You even brought the lockbox and the nail and the name." He didn't know what she meant, but part of him did. Somewhere in the folds of himself, the folds he hadn't felt since childhood. He remembered the room under the stairs, but a first draft of the ledger had been hidden. A draft without ink, just marks scratched into soft wood, beneath carpet that no one had lifted for decades. He remembered finding it, alone, and saying nothing. He remembered tracing the letters with a pocket knife, deepening them, completing the script, finishing what someone else had started. He remembered being proud of it, a child's secret, an innocent game, but it hadn't been innocent. It had let something in. The mirror girl stopped reading. The ledger closed itself. She stood. Caleb realized with a small jolt that her legs did not bend properly. She walked like her joints had been drawn wrong, like an illustration from a storybook that didn't understand anatomy. She reached behind her back and pulled something forward. The original ledger, not the copy in the cabin, not the version he'd carried from room to room. This one was stitched in the skin of the house, gray and pulsing faintly, like it had once been alive and maybe still was. She opened it. The pages were blank. Then a single line wrote itself across the center of the first page. What is remembered is returned. She stepped forward. He couldn't move. She placed the book against his chest. It clung to him, not fell. Clung. Its threads dug into his shirt, pierced through the fabric, laced themselves through skin, tendon, sternum. Caleb screamed, but no sound came. The ledger melted into him, each page soaking into his ribcage, fluttering briefly before vanishing. With every page, a piece of the house returned. The broken hallway that had once led nowhere now looped forever. The attic window with the girl's face pressed against it, even when the attic was sealed. The cellar door that had never been opened now hung ajar, whispering in rot. He saw it all. He was it all. The final page entered him and sealed shut. The mirror girl looked pleased. "You're ready now," she said. "The ledger needs a keeper." And with that, she walked backward into the fire pit. The heartbeat pulsed once, and then extinguished. Darkness, stillness, the sense of every wall in the world inhaling. And then, footsteps, not his. The cabin door opened. The bell above it rang once. The door stayed open, windless, but the bell swayed side to side in a perfect rhythm, measured, almost mechanical. Caleb did not stand. He was not sure he still had legs. His body sat upright in the chair, but the feeling of sitting was more of a memory than a present state. He looked down at his chest. No wound, no seam, but he could feel the pages shifting inside him. Each breath rustled a line of text. Each beat of his heart turned another page. He didn't need to open the book to read it now. He was the book. The room was dim and soft, as though the air were thick with parchment. The fire pit was black again, dead, but the scent of burnt ink lingered, curling like incense in corners. He waited, because that's what the ledger had always been for. Waiting. And then the bell rang again. This time, someone entered. The footsteps were cautious, heels grazing the floorboards, not quite lifting. The figure was slim, robed in something like rain-soaked cloth. A hood obscured the face, but not the sound. Short, quick breaths, the kind you try to keep quiet, but never quite manage to. "Hello," the figure asked. The voice was young, genderless, and it stung with familiarity Caleb could not place, like a childhood friend he'd forgotten existed, until their voice struck the memory loose like a shard of mirror behind drywall. He didn't answer, but the bell had summoned them, and the ledger was open now. Him, not it, so the page turned. "They will ask," the ledger whispered, "but not what they mean to ask. They will leave, but not the way they arrived." The bell tolls forward, but the house moves backward. Caleb blinked. His hands moved, not by will, but by function. A pen appeared in one. The other opened a drawer beneath the desk. Inside, a fresh sheet of parchment, yellowed, already slightly curled at the edges. He laid it flat. "Who are you?" the voice asked again. The figure had stepped fully into the room now. The door closed by itself behind them. The bell gave one final, dead clang. Where was everyone? Caleb didn't look at them. He wrote. The pen dragged itself across the paper. They do not know yet. They must be asked. They must ask. They must hear their name on a stranger's tongue. He waited. The figure took another step forward. Is this the place from the stories? My grandmother said she came here once, a long time ago. I thought it burned down. Caleb turned the page. The ledger wrote, they always say it burned. The fire never catches. It only remembers. The figure stopped at the center of the room. They raised their hands to the hood. Caleb's body tensed. Even the walls seemed to lean inward, listening. The hood fell back. A face, pale, eyes too wide, too hollow. Not young at all, but not old either. Aged in the wrong direction. Their mouth opened, and before they could speak again, Caleb felt the next page rise in his throat. It pushed against his tongue. His jaw unhinged slightly, not by his own muscles, but by something beneath them, something beneath everything. A voice, his voice, but ancient and saturated with ink, emerged. Welcome. The figure dropped to their knees. Their head fell forward. Hair pooled on the floor like water. And just as Caleb stood to complete the rite, a knock at the door. Not a visitor's knock. Not the knock of the lost, but the knock of someone who belonged. Someone who remembered. The bell did not ring. The door opened, and there, in the threshold, stood the mirror girl, now in full flesh. Her eyes locked with his. She nodded. The fire behind the grate roared to life, and the final page turned inside his ribs. The girl did not speak. She entered as though she'd done so many times before, like a ghost rehearsing the steps of a dance it no longer knew the music to. Her hair was dry this time, dark strands feathering over her collar. The shimmer of the mire no longer clung to her limbs. Her dress was wool. Worn, yes, but real, tangible. The room stilled. Even the fire held its breath. Caleb felt the edges of himself stiffen. The way paper curls toward flame. The figure on the floor, hood fallen, hair splayed, breath slowing, remained bowed. The girl crossed to Caleb. He did not recognize her name, but he knew it all the same. You stayed, she said gently. Caleb nodded. His jaw hurt from the silence. It isn't always like this, she said. Sometimes it ends in the water, sometimes in the roots. This time it ends with a book. She stepped behind him, fingers grazing the desk as she passed. The ink pot shimmered beneath her hand, swirling into a single perfect circle of black. A second pot, empty, tilted on its side. She picked it up and set it straight. There are rules, she murmured, but only in the beginning. Caleb looked at the ledger on the desk. It was no longer him. The separation had occurred in silence, somewhere between the hood falling and her entering. He was flesh again, tired, dry, brittle. The ledger pulsed on the table like a sleeping heart. The girl touched its corner. The pulse ceased. She turned. I was the first, you know. Caleb blinked. The memory came back. Not clearly, not in pictures, but in scent, in rhythm. Rain. Shadows kneeling beside a lake. A bell tolling with no tower. I thought it would be a refuge, she said. But I never left. And so, no one else did either. The figure on the floor stirred. Their breathing returned, shallow and high in the chest. That one will become the room, she said. Not the desk. The east wall, maybe behind the shutters. Someone must always be watching. She looked at Caleb. You can leave now. His mouth was too dry to ask. She understood. Because you wrote it down, she said, and because you didn't try to read ahead. Her smile was soft and wrong. Not cruel, not kind, just outside of time. She turned back to the ledger, opened it, read a line aloud. When the ledger forgets its author, the house unbuilds itself. The air shifted, the ceiling groaned, the books on the shelf shivered. The bell outside swung once, one last time, and then with a clean, crystalline snap, fell from its bracket. The fire went out. The shutters snapped open. And in the distance, over the black water of the mire, the dawn rose, not gold but a deep and hollow violet, the kind of light you might find inside a bruise. Go, she whispered, looking at him with eyes now brimming with ink, before the page turns. Caleb stepped away from the desk, away from the house. He did not walk through the door. He walked through the mirror. It rippled like water, and then sealed behind him with no sound. The ledger lay closed. The girl sat behind the desk. The figure on the floor began to rise. Somewhere outside, the bell called again. A knock, a voice, a question, and the house waited once more.